and who was a communist. And supposedly, according to this woman whose grandfather was the Supreme Court, her grandfather was on the death list because they voted him in, and then he had this huge death list that he was going to go and murder all the rich people. And he had stationed tanks and soldiers and everything in a big circle around the whole city, and then they were going to enclose the city and murder everybody and supplant everybody with government people. And but in the last minute, the general rebelled because he was in cahoots with all the rich people who had been rebelling by shutting down all their businesses and starving the people to try to turn the popular opinion against the voted president. And so he had a coup, and then he took over and was a military dictator for 18 years, Pinochet, where he murdered 30,000 people by drugging them and dropping out of planes, and that's the kind of and not allowing people to go outside after sunset, and that's the kind of political system you get when people don't communicate. They just they just do their agenda, and then they have different agendas, so then the stronger guy just knocks over the weaker guy. And that's kind of how what happens when you don't communicate. They're also really big liars, and I mean, I don't want to like just talk trash about Chileans, but so I think the reason and the remedy for why they lie and how they could stop lying is, I think a lot of times they feel like they have to lie, because there's just so many rules. The easiest way to get around it is just to lie. But then they take it way too far and they start lying about everything. I had like my wife. What kind of lies did she tell me? She told me when she broke up with me that her daughter. Well, actually, I don't want to talk about that. There's some stuff I can't talk about. One of them is when she went to Spain, her mother was homesick, and she was there for a month, and she was going to stay there, but her mother told her she was dying of lung cancer and had 6 months to live. So she had to come back to say her farewells, and then she moved back, and then she was like, oh yeah, I just said that, whatever. She just said it so she'd come back. Stuff like that. There's this other guy, I won't say who he is, but Chilean, was saying that telling me about like this Mini. His friend had an Austin Mini, and he'd go to the Mini races, and every time he revs it up, the whole front comes up and it goes like this and down the road, and then it comes down, and he wins $1,500 every single weekend. But the kid lived with his dad, who was a bike repair mechanic in the ghetto, who lived on like $1 a day or something. Had like dirt floors in their house. So he didn't make that much money, and Minis wouldn't start like that because they're front-wheel drive. Anyways, I've but a bunch of stories like that. But yeah, just telling stories. Just telling stories. But the big thing is, I guess, the communication. They just can't. They can't communicate. And when they do, they have to do it like in an angry way, like they're blowing their top or something. And the classism, poor people don't have any opinions, and it's like they don't allowed to have opinions. They just believe it's like, oh yeah, the rules are that, and we just follow the rules and whatever. But at the same time, they don't like the rich people, and they don't trust the rich people. So if you don't like the rich people or trust the rich people and the lawyers who make all the rules that support all the rich people, then why do you just like go along with the rules for everything and follow them? One example is like, I guess, bikes. If you're on a bike, that must mean you're poor, because I never saw any rich people like riding bikes around. Some, I guess, bike racer people, they probably don't ride their bikes around. That like means you're poor. And bikes don't have any respect, and it's weird because they should, because that place is really polluted. Every time I'd ride my bike to a class and come back, I'd have to change out the shirt after every single time, because every single time the inside of the collar would be totally black, and I should have worn a mask the whole time I was there. I'd probably be a lot healthier in my lungs. But yeah, bikes don't. I got run off the road twice, like people passing me and then just turning in front of me, and we ended up both having to completely stop, or else they'd run over me twice in 1 month. Once we were stopped in a light and some busy road, and all the cars were already stopped, and then I was like, this guy was parked way too, it's on a 2-lane road with a median, and I couldn't pass him to get to the front of the red light on his left side because he was way next to the curb. So I went around, and then I came in front of him, and when I did that, he honked at me, and I looked at him, and then I rode past, and then I guess at the next light he came up and he like yelled at me. And I think he yelled at me because I rode in front of him, and he thought that was disrespectful of me to like ride in front of his car, even though he wasn't even moving at all. And I came down and I was like, dude, what's your problem? And there's some English dude in the car with him, and he's like, dude, you shouldn't like ride in a road. It's like, I shouldn't ride in a road? There's a road down there with a bike path. That guy, English dude, I don't know what his problem was. I guess he was just trying to be kissing the dude's ass. But another time, I was riding down the road, and it was like a really busy road, but it was a small road. It was down Bella Vista. And I'm riding down the road behind a car in the middle of the lane. And then I hear the car behind me honk. So I turn around, and it's this old dude with his wife and like a pretty like in a late model car, and he flips me off, and then he tells me to like get out of the road. I guess he was pissed off that I was in the middle of the road. But I kind of did this, like, what? And then I looked forward, and then pretty much immediately after that, I passed like 20 cars in front of me. I was in the middle of the road because I was going faster than the cars. It was like traffic jam. But he thought that that was like disrespectful of me to be in the middle of the road. Once a car flipped me off because I ran a red light, but it was one of those red lights on a T road where the light's only there for the cars, not for the pedestrians or the bikes. Another time, this lady passed me on this road that was like not crowded at all, and she was so close that she knocked her window, her rear view mirror in, and the passenger had to push it out again. And so she stopped at the next light, and I went to ask her be like, what? And before I said anything, I wasn't angry. Before she said anything, she starts yelling at me and then rolls the window up. So yeah, they don't like bikers, and I think that's because they're seen as poor people, and poor people are seen as less. And that is kind of the attitude that that's what tweaked me. That's what this whole video is about, that poor people, you feel like you're worth less as a person. And so therefore, not only do you make less money, and they make a ridiculously small amount of money. I think it's like 60 to 1, like, you know, like the maid would make like 60, or a mechanic or somebody would make like 60 times less than their boss. And this rich woman who I was doing the classes for, she had 2 full-time maids. She was a single mother because her husband died. She had like 4 kids, I think. But her house wasn't that big, and she had 2 people who were there all day, every day, helping her take care. So it was like slavery. And every one of these her sister had the same thing, the full-time maid. And her sister, one day I was doing a class with her kid, and the kid was really friendly. He was like 11 or something, or 13 or something, being intelligent too, asking me questions. But she was screaming at these like gardeners or something for like the entire class, for like 45 minutes, screaming at the top of her lungs, like literally, like insulting them and being the biggest bitch. And they didn't do anything. They were just there like watching her. And that is degrading. Maybe they were trying to rip her off or something, but maybe that's true, because that is something that happens. My brother, like for example, my wife's brother owned a jewelry manufacturing business and had like 5 guys working for him or something, and they were always stealing gold from him. But yeah, Thomas Jefferson said that of slavery, that slavery is a bad thing because it's not just bad for the slaves by making them give up their dignity and have to give up their freedoms and do whatever the boss tells them to, and have to grovel and beg and be perfect manners to them, and call them master and everything, and be, yet at the same time be so much poorer. It's like adding insult to injury. They're so much poorer and owe so much less and work so much harder, but they have to get, like, you know, abused. But it's also bad for the, Thomas Jefferson said, it's also bad for the rich people because it gives them bad manners by getting in the habit of yelling at people and for like showing up a minute late, or having temper tantrums, and then they teach their kids how to do that, and then the kids grow up to be rude assholes, and it's reminded me of this, like that other little girl, the rich lawyer lady's daughter was 10, and she was this total bitch. She was like, I'd never seen anything like it. I was giving her classes, and it was this one thing like earthquakes, and like earthquakes do damage, and she was like, I don't know how we got into this, but I was like, yeah, earthquakes. She goes, earthquakes, all earthquakes do damage. I go, not all earthquakes do damage. She goes, yes. And then she asked me, and she insisted over and over, and then, but there was this other thing. She was asking me something, a simple question, like, is this? And I said yes. I gave her the answer. But then she asked me again. But the way that she asked me, she goes, is this the answer? And I go, yes. And she goes, oh, is this the answer? And she did it like 4 times. And I finally go, yes, I'm giving you the answer. But yeah, she had no respect. And I think that's just how they treat the poor people. No respect. And I never had a class with her again. She tried to give me classes with her other kids, but I didn't have the time for it. But yeah, I think that's just how it tweaked me, how the rich people and the poor people live in completely different worlds, and they hate each other. Poor people hate the rich people, because I know that because my wife is always talking trash about them. Those bad people. And her dad, he'd get drunk and be like, they don't care about anybody but themselves. They don't care. And I mean, they do keep themselves separate, like the clubs, like the pools. There's this pool on the top of the hill. What's it called? Virgin Mary Hill. It's like 7,000 pesos to get in. That's like $20. No pool is that much. It's like, you know, they charge so much because it's in a cool place, and they charge so much because, I guess, and I never saw it like crowded or anything. I guess they just want to keep them separated. And I guess sociologically, socioeconomically, the reasons would be if some rich person marries a poor person, well, then the poor person's going to, I guess, try to get free shit out of the rich person. You know, bring their family over all the time, be like, oh no, he's sick. Oh, nobody's there to help him. Oh, you have money, you give me your money. And so they'd feel like they're abused, and I'm sure it is like that. Poor people ripping off the rich people, but the rich people are dicks. Like, my wife got a job with this guy who was the owner of some big import business as the secretary. And after he hired her, he changed the rules and said, oh yeah, no, now you have to work the weekends. Every other weekend you work the weekends. And she's like, but that's not what you said when we first started working. He's like, well, that's how it is now. And yeah, so she quit him after like a month, but it's like they do what they can get away with. Once she was locked in the bathroom by her boss, and he wouldn't let her out until she sucked his dick. He was this like nasty old 60-year-old guy, and she had to take the bus like an hour each way to work. these loud, bumpy buses. And and then she was like abused by the boss. She said how he was like looked down on her and would like always try to make her feel like she did a bad job. And that's what this lady did, who I did classes with once at this institute. I think she got fired because the people didn't like her, but she was like, she asked me to do a class, and she was always doing this, asking me to make up classes for her at the last minute because she couldn't show up. And I would ride my bike out there. It was like 8 miles out of town, and she'd pick me up sometimes, but then I'd just stop doing that because every time she'd pick me up in the morning, she'd show up like 10 minutes late, like literally always 10 or 15 minutes late. She could never, ever, ever, ever show up on time, ever. And she'd always call, be like, oh yeah, sorry, hey, I'm late again, hey. And I think she got fired, but she took all my classes away, and she said it was because, well, the first time she goes, yeah, you can't have classes with that guy anymore because they said you showed up all sweaty. But it wasn't my class. It was her class I was taking over that she told me that that she asked me to take over. I think it was a half hour before it started. And I had a half hour to get there, but I was 8 miles out of town. No, I had 20 minutes to get there. It was like, it started in like 15 or 20 minutes, and I was 8 miles away, and I told her that. And then she accuses me of showing up all sweaty, and so I can't have that class anymore, or she's going to take another class away. And she did that in a text message, but yeah, I think, I think what happened is she just got fired, and she just wanted to make it seem like it was my fault. I've experienced stuff like that before too, because they can't say thank you. That's one thing that it's like against the rules for them to do there, is to say thank you. If you say thank you there, it's kind of, I have the feeling it's kind of like acknowledging that you owe them something. So then they could be like, oh, but I gave you that thing that last time. Remember how you said thank you? So now you owe me. Gimme. So then instead of saying thank you, they say vale, which means like, okay. They're like, vale. It's like, here, I'll give you my an extra pair of socks. Vale. Yeah. It's but I think that all that comes from just a lack of abundance, and just people, if you don't have enough money, but the rich people have money. So I don't know what their deal is, why they can't. They have to grub it so much. It's weird. Yeah, but they do shit that doesn't make any sense, like trying to put each other in boxes. My wife had a tattoo on her arm. It's about right here, and all it was a heart with her son's name and an arrow going through it. And she was a telemarketer, the kind of person who give people phone calls to do surveys, in a tiny little cubicle, in a whole office building filled with all of them. And she had to dress up perfectly for that, and she had to blotch out her tattoo and make it look like she didn't have a tattoo, even though she didn't deal with anybody there. That's the kind of, man, I could go on. Yeah, they're not really, when you don't communicate, I don't know, they don't communicate, and they can't be nice. I had this, when I first got there, when I very, very first got there, I got a job at an institute. And the institute gave me these books to do classes with, but they didn't have the cassettes. And I asked the guy like 3 or 4 times, and he never had the cassettes. So I had to give the classes of these books without cassettes, but there was no but the books were reliant on cassettes. Without the cassettes, you couldn't really do anything with them, because that's basically what the book was listening to the cassette and then talk about it. But anyways, these ladies, they didn't like me, and I took over from this other guy, so maybe they like kicked him out too. But they were being these bitches. They were like, basically would refuse to talk to me. And so then they canceled the class, but the guy at the institute never told me. So I showed up, and the guy, the boss guy, who I had conversations with classes with, and I thought we were cool, he comes in and he was like, scowls at me like I was like the worst, and then like goes in the room, and then I was like, what the hell? He didn't say anything, and I asked the lady, the other secretary, was like, oh yeah, we called and canceled. I was like, oh, well, you know, I didn't hear. And yeah, it's not nice. There's this other lady, I got this job at another institute, and I forgot to bring my book once, and but I found out, it was the only time in my whole life I'd ever forgotten to do that. But I was about to tell her, because I found out right before I got there, and I was like, but she goes, oh, your book, and stormed off, and then like called the institute guy and like totally freaked out on him. I don't know. Anyways, I guess I got a little bit sidetracked. Sounds like I'm complaining. But like, what's the remedy? The remedy, I think, is if you got to keep the rich people rich and the poor people poor, and they're like, poor people are really poor. I think dignity is something that you should definitely allow the poor people to have, and allow them to, you know, if somebody's going to not make any money and be a courier, I don't know, what like a manual laborer, like a construction person, or a telemarketer, or even a maid in a house, you know, or anybody really, even a person who deals with people, like a concierge, you know, any of these people who don't make much money, they should be allowed to have tattoos, and to grow their hair out, and to dye their hair, and to have personalities. Because it's bad enough that these rich people, I don't know how much they make, the rich people make, and I like to figure it out, but I wouldn't be surprised if like a lawyer there would make more than a lawyer in America, or a certain kind of lawyer. It's probably whole different kinds of stratifications of lawyers. But yeah, just give the people dignity. And I think it got like that whole people not trying to communicate with each other. I think it got like that from the Catholic Church. I don't think the Catholic Church is as bad as, you know, fundamentalist crazy as some other religions, like the Jehovah's Witnesses, but all the rules, they put all these rules on them. Catholic Church says you're not allowed to use condoms because it's like murder. How they think that, I don't have no idea. That must say that masturbation is evil, because that's murder too, because it's the same thing. But yeah, rules, all these rules. I held a cross upside down to my mother-in-law once, because I dressed up as a pope or one of those guys for Halloween, and she freaked. She goes, no, don't do that ever, you're gonna curse, that's against Catholic law, no, to hold a cross upside down. I was like, whoa, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't know. But yeah, all those rules, if you have all those rules, then, and it's the Pope who says it, and you can't argue it, then the boss of the company can create all these rules that you can't argue, so then you might as well not argue. And then you just get dumbed down and dumbed down and dumbed down and more numb until you, at the end, you're like this. And you don't even understand why you would have an opinion about anything. And the education there is not good. Like, I asked my wife's brother's girlfriend, who was like 19 or something, I asked her to draw a map of South America, and she didn't know the shape of it. She drew like a round, basically a round thing. And I asked her to put Santiago. And she put Santiago, she's like, I don't know, put Santiago on the upper right of it. She thought Santiago was where like Belém, Brazil is, on the coast of Brazil. And I was about to ask her another question, and then my wife came in. She's like, stop it, don't make fun of her, stop making fun of her. And I was like, I was just figuring something out. And then her other friend, my wife's best male friend, Saul, bless his heart, he's really smart, but he's illiterate. He never learned how to read or write. He thought that the Vatican was in America. He thought the Catholic Church was centered in America. Yeah, I think that's because they just don't have any. I mean, look, the rich people who go to the nice private schools, they know all that stuff. They know where the Vatican is. They've traveled all over the world. They've gone on vacation to the Vatican, to Rome. They could draw a map of South America. But the poor people, they don't know anything. They're not educated. My friend got a job at a school. I don't know if I think it was a high-end private school actually, and he said that the education there was bad. Like they weren't told, teachers weren't told to do anything. They're just like, here, do the books. And then they hired him, and then they paid him less and less each week, and then all the teachers wanted to have a meeting with the lady, but she refused to have a meeting with him. To even have a meeting with him, so they all like quit. But that's another story. I've got a whole bunch of like crazy like personal stories, but I don't want to talk about that because I don't want to like that would involve my girlfriend, my wife's family and stuff. And in fact, I already did those videos on other stories and other videos. I don't know if I should have. It's all in English though. They can't speak English. But yeah, it's weird having and I think that's why when I get comments on some of my videos, and it's by people who clearly aren't good at English, and they're clearly not English speakers, and they're not native English speakers, and they're not even good at English, you know, they're probably from like a third world country, then they get upset with me for expressing my ideas, and then they throw in all these other things like, you clearly don't know anything, you are shouldn't even be making videos if you don't, and just like empty insults and stuff. I kind of feel like I'm back in Chile, because I think that's kind of how some of them would argue. They're just like, my stance is this and your stance is that, and then they get into this big charade, like throwing in red herrings, and it's like, so just they have to value communication, you know, and keep the dignity alive for the poor people. And poor people's dignity will continue to increase as soon as like more and more poor people can get their hands on computers and internet and educate themselves. I was going to say some other stuff. Ooh, but I've been going for an hour already. Oh my God, I got to turn this off or it's going to be too big.